Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Dome at Home, another evening of astronomy here put on by the Manitoba Museum's Planetarium. We're, of course, sponsored by the Province of Manitoba's Safe at Home Manitoba grant, which is keeping everybody safe at home while we weather through all of these restrictions. Looks like there's some light at the end of the tunnel, which is great, but we're still going to be here doing our show on Thursday nights for quite a while. My name is Scott Young. I'm the planetarium astronomer at the Manitoba Museum, and I'll be your host for this evening. We have a chat window open. For those of you that have joined us on Zoom, you can join the chat window and give us feedback, ask questions and things like that in there. My colleague and friend Mike is with me as always, and he's in the chat window sort of moderating, and he'll also be keeping an eye on the social media feeds. We're going out live to Facebook Live and YouTube Live. Mike, how are you doing today?
I am very good, Scott. How are you doing?
You know, not too bad. It's nice and warm. It's been sunny all day. I mean, the weather bodes well for maybe some stargazing tonight after the show, which is kind of nice. It's great to see the simulated sky, but nothing beats the real thing.
Absolutely, I agree. Also very excited. We opened up the museum again for the first time since last October. Museum galleries had some people walking through it nice and safely. It was so good to have people in our facility again. Sadly, the planetarium and science gallery not just open yet, but it is really good to be able to welcome visitors back into our facility.
Oh yeah, for sure. We miss you folks. For those of you that come down to the museum all the time. Make sure you drop into the chat and tell us where you're watching from and how many folks you have watching. We like to keep track of our numbers and things like that. And it's always nice to see where people are watching from. We know we have folks from Winnipeg and from across Manitoba and across Canada, across North America. And we've had folks from all over the world tuning in every Thursday night. So that's kind of been fun. We got a couple of announcements to say. First of all, it's happy birthday to Adrian. I just noticed that it's Adrian's birthday. She posted in the chat. And so happy birthday to you. I wanted to say hello again to my friend Rowan and the folks at Oakenwald School, Ms. Mitchler's class, who's been watching us faithfully every week. I was chatting with a new friend named Heidi between last week and this week. Last week, we talked about the full moon and some of the stories and things surrounding the full moon. And I expressed disbelief in the idea that, you know, emergency rooms get busier during the full moon season. And Heidi was, having worked in healthcare, was quite adamant that there's something to it. And so I did some looking around, and we'll have to put it into a future show. I think it's a bit too much to get into now, but it may be that there's some kind of connection that is being found there. So anyway, stay tuned for that, and we'll see what else we can tell you about the full moon and its effect on humanity. We've had a couple of great videos come in from the Mars landings. The idea of making your own Mars lander, putting an egg pilot inside and then throwing it out the window or off a table or something like that and having it survive. It's been popular enough that we're actually going to be doing something bigger than we intended. We're going to be doing some things with it around spring break. So for those of you that have sent them in already, don't worry, we are going to get to them. We are going to show some of them on the show, but we are in fact also going to be sort of doing some more stuff with it. So watch for an announcement in the next little while leading up to the spring break time period. Okay, we're going to get right into our content now with, well, let's start off with cool space stuff.
Cool space stuff!
So it turns out that this week is the 10th anniversary of the very last landing of the Space Shuttle Discovery. Some of our younger viewers may not even know what the Space Shuttle is or ever seen them because they've been in museums for about 10 years. These were the things that went up into the to the space station. They built the space station. They did all sorts of amazing missions. Discovery was the first of the space shuttles to be retired, and that was 10 years ago this week, the end of its last mission on March the 9th, 2011. Mike, you remember the shuttle program, I'm imagining. What do you remember about that whole program the most?
Oh, no, no, no. I'm way too young to have remembered the Space Shuttle program, Scott.
That's right.
No, that's a lie. No, yeah, I mean the Space Shuttle. I mean, what an amazing program. As you and I were growing up, I mean, it was just sort of this, idea that eventually came to fruition in the early '80s, and growing up, I mean, I can remember watching many launches. It's kind of like any other thing. After a few of them, that just kind of got routine, or it seemed routine for a lot of people, the public especially. But there was always just enough interest for me to want to see them, and I never got to see one live. That's my only regret.
Yeah, I've got the one up on you there. I did get to go down to see back in the good old days before security concerns were such a big deal. The Canadian Space Agency invited a whole bunch of people from the Science Center community to come down and see Marc Garneau's third launch into space. Now, by invite, I mean they basically said we could come, but we had to pay our own ticket and hotel and things like that. It's not like we flew there on their dime or anything. But I decided that I was going to run up my credit card and take the opportunity, because when else do you get to do that? And so we got to see the Space Shuttle launch, and it was amazing. This massive piece of hardware, probably one of the most complicated systems ever built, would carry 7 people up into space, would carry, the Hubble Space Telescope up into space. Seeing it thunder off the pad was really amazing. That was my first space launch as well. And I never had a chance to go back. I went back a couple of times hoping to catch a launch, but the launches would be delayed. And so I spent some lovely time in Florida, but I didn't actually see another space shuttle launch. And now I won't have another chance. But one day I hope to get down there and see the other things. So, yeah. I mean, Hubble is a massive achievement that Discovery carried. So that's part of this space shuttle's legacy. Also, a couple of famous Canadians were carried into space aboard Discovery. The first Canadian woman in space, Roberta Bondar, went into space aboard Discovery on the STS-42 mission in 1992. Roberta Bondar, great environmental activist, an artist, author of children's books. She came back from her trip into space very awakened and changed in her outlook on things. Many of the astronauts come back and think, wow, the Earth is really special. When you see it from above, it changes you. And she has been very active in promoting sustainable development and environmental causes since then. Great lady. Also, Julie Payette was also aboard Discovery back in 1996, her first space mission. And so that was basically all of the Canadian women that have gone into space did so aboard the Space Shuttle Discovery. So a little bit of trivia for you there. Not the next woman to go in, or the next Canadian woman to go into space, though. That will probably be in the next few years. And we're excitedly looking forward to seeing what's going to happen there. I just see Cindy has a question here. Who was the first ever woman in space? That was Valentina Tereshkova, who is a Soviet Union or Russian cosmonaut back in 1963, I think she went up. And so that was the very first one. And then there wasn't another woman for a little while. And then eventually, as more and more women became astronauts, it became a more common thing. Okay. It's been 10 years since the space shuttle has basically retired. And when it retired, there was no replacement on the docket. In fact, nobody really knew what the American space program was going to do after that. They had a bunch of different ideas, but nothing was flying yet. All of the astronauts on the space station basically would have to hitch a ride with the Russian Soyuz spacecraft to be able to get up and down. It's only 10 years later, and just yesterday I watched SpaceX's Starship. This is the spacecraft that Elon Musk wants to send people to Mars in. It's still blowing up when it lands, but it's flying, being made by this private company, building something that is on the scale of the Apollo moon missions. It's pretty incredible how far things have come in 10 years. I mean, the Dragon spacecraft is carrying astronauts up to the space station on a regular basis now. There are other companies getting involved. It's just, we never would have believed this 10 years ago when things looked pretty glum. For Canada, we don't have our own spacecraft or our own launching facilities. We always hitch a ride with someone. And so when the American Space Shuttle went down, that was a lot of seats that were not available to us anymore. So it's amazing how quickly things turned around. Now we've got the Lunar Gateway that's being built and is going to go into orbit around the moon, and there'll be the Canadarm on that as well. And we'll have a Canadian astronaut heading out to the vicinity of the moon in the next 4 or 5 years. I never would have believed that idea, even back when Discovery was still flying. So it's amazing how things change. A bunch of questions went by there. Mike, do you have anything that came up that was sort of pertinent to this part of the discussion? I just couldn't see them as they went by so fast.
Yeah, they are flying past, and I love seeing all these questions here. I mean, a couple of comments about Challenger. Of course, we were looking at Discovery specifically there, but I mean, no memories of the Space Shuttle program are complete without thinking of the Challenger incident or Columbia as well. Very sad parts of what is a very successful program. I mean, yes, of course, the loss of 2 shuttles and their crew, never a good thing, but it should also be focused on just how much positive came out of that program. Lou was asking about when was the Space Shuttle program retired permanently.
Yeah, well, the shuttle was retired largely because of the second accident. It's such a complicated system, and the idea was you build this reusable spaceship and you fly it into space, and then it lands like an airplane, and you turn around and launch it again. Well, it turned out that the re-entry part is so difficult that the shuttles would take a lot of maintenance in between launching, and it became very dangerous. And in fact, there were a couple of loss of vehicles. And so what happens is that people basically decided, okay, we've got to just give up on the shuttle. We've built the space station, which was the main goal of it. If we cancel the shuttle now, it'll spur us into making new spacecraft. Well, that's not really what happened, but ultimately that's what they were hoping. Now, interesting, yeah. You mentioned about the accidents there. Discovery was the shuttle used to return to flight after both of those accidents. So it was the first one to fly after the Challenger and again after Columbia. And I see someone has just asked, where's Discovery now? Discovery is in Virginia at the Smithsonian's Udar Hazy Annex. It's basically part of the Air and Space Museum, but it's across the river in Virginia. So that's a thing you can go and visit. Okay. Was there anything else there, Mike, or shall I move on?
No, I think you caught most of the good questions there. I see a few others I may try to get at in the chat myself, but you should move on.
Great. Okay. So we got to check in on Mars as well. Percy, the Perseverance rover, is on Mars, sent back a amazing picture just, I guess, a couple of days ago, the full 360-degree panorama with the high-resolution zoom lens camera, just like being there, basically. It's such a large file, I couldn't put it into anything that I could display on the broadcast. So I'll encourage you just to go to just Google Mars 2020, and it will come up all over the place, because it's just an amazing image. And it's basically, it shows the new generation of cameras that is being used. The other thing that we know is that the Ingenuity helicopter is working. It's not flying yet, but it's survived the landing, and basically right now they're charging up its batteries. And so hopefully soon they'll send that thing flying around. We got that great video of the landing, and now I'm really looking forward to some high-def video from the drone flying around and looking back and showing Perseverance on the surface and all sorts of stuff. So that'll be pretty cool. We had a question last week about the other 2 spacecraft, the Chinese Tianwen-1 and the United Arab Emirates Hope spacecraft. Neither of them have released any other images or much other information. Apparently they are there and they are functioning, but they haven't released any pictures. So it's kind of like a bit of a mystery why they're not sort of showing all these pictures. Maybe they just don't want to compete with Perseverance, or they're not as good as the Perseverance ones, so who knows. But they're still up there, and we are trying to find out exactly what they're doing. So Oh yes, someone just asked about the Perseverance parachute. Yeah, the parachute had this coded message, and basically it said the coded message was "Dare great things." I think that's what it was. That's the motto of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Essentially, is to dare great things, go to Mars, stuff
Dare
like that.
mighty things, I think it was,
Mighty.
Scott.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you, mighty things. Um, so it's that was a cool little thing that they did on the design of the parachute. Okay, let us move on here. There's one more sort of, I guess, space related cool space thing that I wanted to talk about. Where's my picture? Here we go. So just this morning, the Starlink satellites were launched again. You may have heard of these. These are internet satellites that are being launched by Elon Musk and SpaceX. They launched this morning and they go up and they dump 60 satellites at once up into low Earth orbit. And those satellites start off in a big chunk, but then they slowly spread out, and eventually there'll be this swarm of them all the way around the world so that people in rural areas can have satellite internet. And they have made them. Oh, some people have just got Starlink. Awesome, that's right. There's some of the folks in Manitoba can qualify for that. Let's chat offline. I'd like to hear a little bit about your experience. The Starlink though, for a while was really offending astronomers because all of a sudden you're out there looking at the stars and suddenly 60 extra stars are all going by, moving across the sky. And then an hour later, another 60 would come by. Like there's going to be like 60,000 of these satellites up there. Well, they seem to not be as bright as they used to be. They're doing some things to try and make them not as annoying, I guess, or not as obtrusive to astronomers. But they are cool to see. When they just have been launched, they're still nice and close together. You'll get a whole bunch of these dots all moving in a straight line. Tomorrow morning at 5:35 a.m., they come almost right over Winnipeg. So if you're in southern Manitoba, basically this map shows the entire sky. So the overhead is right in the middle, and then this is your horizon all the way around. So they basically appear almost straight overhead, sort of in the southwest, go almost overhead, and then move down towards the east northeast horizon. And that is they should be basically a whole bunch of dots very close together. Now you might not see 60 of them. Some of them will be brighter or fainter, but I'm going to take a look tomorrow. 5:35 to about 5:40 in the morning, if it's clear, we'll have a chance to see those. So I wanted to flag that for people because we get a lot of calls saying, hey, what were all those lights in the sky? So now you know. Okay.
Scott,
Yeah.
sorry, Michelle on Facebook is wondering, and I've been trying to look it up, but I can't see it. Do you know how big each of those satellites?
Yeah, they're literally about this big.
Okay.
Yeah, they're like a briefcase kind of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem. But they do have some comments there on Starlink. That's great. There are some solar panels on one side to charge things up, and that's the reflective shiny bit. So it's kind of like a little bit of a mirror in space, but they figured out some stuff around that. Anyway, watch for that tomorrow morning. And speaking of watching the sky, that's kind of what this whole show is about. So let's go to the sky here. If you've been watching the show for a while, you've seen a bunch of the constellations that we've talked about. I'm just going to go back off to the northern sky here, and we're using Stellarium as always, this planetarium software, which is a great way to sort of see what's up in the sky. So off in the northern part of the sky, you've got the same circumpolar constellations that have been visible all the time. They're slowly spinning around. The Big Dipper is getting higher and higher up into the sky. The Big Dipper, of course, is part of a group of stars called Ursa Major, the Great Bear. And actually, well, it kind of looks more like a weasel than a bear, I think, with his long nose and so on, and some legs. Actually, the star right at the end of the nose of the bear is called Omicron Ursa Majoris. It's basically a Greek letter, but locally it's known as the Manitoba Association of Medical Radiation Technologists star. We have this program through the planetarium called Say It with a Star, where you can sort of name a star as a donation, almost like adopting an artifact or things like that. You don't actually own the star, or but it's a way to honor people. And for their 90th anniversary, the radiation technologists named a star in honor of all of their members and their achievements. So that's their star right there. And they mentioned our show on their webpage today, so some of them may be watching. Hi, nice to see you. There's your star. Very easy to find. Find your Big Dipper and then go almost straight up from it, and you'll see sort of this pointy part of Ursa Major. That's the one you got. What's kind of cool about that star, and is that there's a planet around it. There is a planet about 4 times as big as Jupiter orbiting around that star there. You don't own the planet either officially. You can't go there and move in, but still, it's kind of cool. So our northern sky really hasn't changed all that much. If we go off towards the east, oops, there we go. This is where we start to see constellations rising that are kind of new to us. Leo the Lion, we're going to be talking about in detail next week, so I won't go into detail too much about that. And then as we sort of move up and into the southeast and into the south, that's where we still have all of our winter constellations. We've got Orion the Hunter, the belt of Orion over here, the Orion Nebula, a little faint cloud of gas down in the sword of Orion. That's a place where stars are being born. You can see that with your naked eye. It just looks like a little fuzzy star. If you have binoculars, you get a slightly bigger view. If you have a telescope, it's an incredible view. So that's something to watch for. And then even farther along and high in the south, we have Taurus the Bull with this V-shaped group of stars here, and then the Seven Sisters, the Pleiades star cluster right over here, and our friend the planet Mars. We've been watching Mars for what, 6-8 months now in our sky, still up there. And this week, it will actually be passing very close to the Seven Sisters and then moving along in between these 2 star clusters, the Pleiades and the V-shaped group here called the Hyades. It's kind of interesting to compare Mars to Aldebaran, this bright star in Taurus, because they're both kind of the same color and they're almost the same brightness. So you can see if you can tell the difference, see how good your eyes are at distinguishing any difference in color or in brightness. And of course, take notes in your logbook that we've been talking about. Keep all your notes in there, and that'll keep things organized for you. Off in the west, that's where the winter stars are starting to head. I mean, basically Taurus, Orion, they're coming to the end of their run. We'll still see them in the early evening for a little bit, but we will lose them in the west. And the ones that we were watching, Cetus the sea monster, Pegasus the flying horse, Andromeda, they're getting down pretty far in the west. So we've pretty much given up on trying to see those at this point, because usually as soon as you go out, the sky is still fairly bright in this side. I'm actually showing the sky at 8 o'clock tonight instead of 7 o'clock, because at 7 o'clock, it's not really fully dark. And so you can't see all the stars. So I'm sort of showing you what things will look like after the show here. Right overhead, we still have our constellation that we did last week, Auriga, the charioteer. This is the charioteer who doesn't have a chariot, but he does have 3 little goats that he carries around. These constellations make no sense. I don't know. And then Gemini, the twins, they're over here. Gemini, this actually kind of looks like 2 stick figures holding hands. Sure, we'll go with that. So all of these things are visible. You can find the star maps up on our website at the manitobamuseum.ca, and they'll help you find things in the sky. And there's always stuff to look for, of course, but we're just going to focus on a couple of the highlights that you can see here right now. Let me advance here. So Mars, one of the planets of the solar system, moving around the sun. And as it moves, and as we move around the sun, its position changes relative to the background stars. All the stars are so much farther away that any time of the year, none of them really move at all relative to each other. The Pleiades always looks like a little dipper-shaped group of stars. The Hyades always looks like this letter V-shaped group of stars. but Mars moves. And so as we watch Mars over the next little while, you can watch it move between the star clusters, and you can actually see the motions of the planets because we've got this nice reference here. So here's Mars on the this evening, and then tomorrow night it will have moved to there. Now that's not very far, so you might not notice the difference from tonight to tomorrow night. But if you wait another couple of nights, here it is in the 7th. Now it's pretty much right between the Pleiades and the Hyades. And then as we go forward, it's moving a little bit each night. Now, if you are just looking with your eyes, you probably won't notice a change for 4 or 5 days. But if you're using binoculars, you can see some of these fainter stars in the background, and you can actually tell the difference of what, where the planet is moving. And you can see its motion even easier. The field of view of binoculars would basically put the Seven Sisters and Mars in the same field of view. So your binoculars would sort of show about this much sky at once. So try and take those out and see what you can do. We're getting a comment that the screen is very pixelated. Let's see. Looks fine here. Let me check my broadcast monitor just to see if there's anything coming out here that I can take a look at.
Yeah, you're looking good on my screen there, Scott.
Yeah,
so.
okay. Yeah, there could be some internet slowdowns or things like that. I know that when something runs a little slow, it loads the image only partially, but so that might be an issue. Oh, okay, great. So let's move on. I would say that, following Mars and seeing it move through Taurus, that's kind of a fun thing to watch. We've had Mars around for so long, though, people might be, a little sick of it. Well, maybe not sick of it. I mean, it's always cool to see, but, when do we get something else to talk about? Well, the other planets, unfortunately, right now are just not really visible. If you get up really early in the morning and you have a very, very clear southeastern horizon, you might be able to see a few of the other planets very, very low just before the sun comes up. But frankly, it's going to be really difficult to see them. Jupiter, Saturn, and Mercury are all in that part of the sky. But you know what? I'd be very surprised if you can see them unless you have pretty much perfect weather conditions and a perfectly flat horizon. They're really, really low. So right now, it's just not a great time for us to be able to see the other planets. And we'll have to wait a month, and then suddenly we'll be able to see a bunch more planets. They move through these cycles, and sometimes we can see a bunch of them. Sometimes you only see one. There are times when you can't see any, although that's pretty rare, I guess. Okay, let's see here. Any other questions that have come in there, Mike, while I set up for the next scene?
Well, there was a good question from Nina that I sort of answered in the chat. They were asking about how we're able to get a picture of the Milky Way, because it's our galaxy, our home.
Right. Yeah, the great thing about pictures is that going somewhere and taking a picture of something is not the only way to get a picture of it. We're inside the galaxy. And so any picture that we take is going to show the inside view. But if we could measure the distances to all the stars around us, this one's this far, this one's this far, you can build up a 3D model of the galaxy from the inside. And then using computer graphics, you can view it from the outside. And that's essentially what we've done. We've built up that model by observing all these other kinds of stars. And so that's what tells us that the Milky Way galaxy is a spiral shaped galaxy, kind of big and round when you look down on it, but then very thin, almost like a pizza. I had pizza for dinner. So basically a thin crust pizza. And we're inside the crust, basically. So that's how we figure out a lot of these things. The only thing that we can do, the only thing we can do to learn about the stars is to look at the light that they are sending us, because they are so far away. There's just no way we're going to send a Percy the rover or whatever to another star in anything close to our lifetimes. I mean, the closest star is probably about 30,000 years away travel time. So we're not going to be doing that. But by measuring the light, by analyzing the light, by figuring out what colors the light is made of, by doing all sorts of physics on the light, we can figure out a lot of stuff about the stars without having to go there. So it's pretty cool. Harleen has just asked, can people hear us? No, all the microphones are off. We have 130 people on the Zoom and many more on Facebook. So it's impossible for us to have everybody's microphones on, unfortunately. So we're just using the chat for all of our questions and answers and things like that. All right, let us move on. Just going to check our time here. I saw a question go by from Melissa regarding the classes of stars and things like that. So when we analyze the starlight, we basically can categorize stars based on the kinds of starlight that they give off, and it's related to their colors. For example, when we look up into the sky, we see Orion the Hunter here. You remember Orion's star Betelgeuse here. That's the big supergiant star that could explode any minute. It's a red colored star. And that actually tells us about the thing's temperature, the star. We can figure out its size and all sorts of things. Same with Aldebaran over here, also a red star. The stars in the Pleiades are blue stars. And, because color is kind of subjective, you can't just sort of say, oh, this star is red and this star is chartreuse and this one's, yellow or whatever. It's got to be a little bit more defined. So astronomers came up with classifications for the different colors, the different temperatures of stars, and they just gave them letters, and then they gave them numbers and things like that. So it turns out that B stars are blue, not because they're blue. That's not where the B comes from. That's just the letter they happen to get. A stars are white and G stars are yellow. And then K stars start to turn orange. And then M stars are red. So there's this whole sort of classification of defining the stars by their color. And by doing that, you can learn a lot about the nature of the stars. So that's what where those classes come from. But it's probably worth a whole show on itself to sort of get into the details of that. We'll have to look at, we're going to be taking topic lists for coming up in April. So we'll have to think about that one. All right, let's go back to the sky. Let's get rid of our little things here. So the winter constellations there in the south, and we talked about Gemini being nicely visible. We talked about Gemini a couple of weeks ago, I think. The next constellation over in the zodiac, and I saw people talking about their signs, their zodiac signs, their astrological signs or whatever. The next one over is Cancer. Cancer is the second most hard to find constellation of the zodiac. It's just the way it goes. I mean, the zodiac constellations weren't picked because they were famous. Nobody is a Big Dipper. Well, nobody's got the astrological sign of the Big Dipper, for example. Nobody's an Orion, which would be a great constellation to be. But these constellations of the zodiac were picked because they're the ones that the planets, the moon, and the sun appear to move through in our sky. As the planets orbit the sun and as we orbit the sun, all of those things all look like they move through a band across the sky, and that is the zodiac. And so Cancer the Crab is one of the constellations of the zodiac. And so Cancer will be our feature of Connect the Dots this week. So Cancer the Crab, here's the kind of picture that was imagined. All of these colorful images we've been using for this come from a book called Urania's Mirror. It's a set of cards, and it actually has, I just really recently learned this from one of our viewers, Michelle Boyce, who said there's holes where the stars are, and you're supposed to hold it up to the sky and line it up with the actual stars through the holes so that you can see where the pictures are. I mean, now we use our phone, but this is from 1840. So someone had invented augmented reality apps for the stars in 1840. I think that's pretty cool. Anyway, that's the picture you're supposed to look for. And I have to say, that's not what I see when I look in the center of this picture. So here on the right is Gemini that we're familiar with. Over there on the left is Leo, and Leo at least has some bright stars in it. This star here is one of the brighter ones in the sky, and these ones stand out too. So, I mean, Leo is pretty easy to find. In between them is Cancer the Crab, this whole sort of blank area there. And that's the picture. That's the connect the dots. Kind of looks like, I don't know, doesn't really look like anything. Sorry, all of you folks with Cancer. Sorry, all of you folks who are a Cancer in the astrological signs. It's a tough one to find. I don't see a crab there at all. In fact, I have a hard time finding Cancer, the constellation, all the time, because it doesn't even have sort of a nice geometric, it's not like a triangle or a square or whatever. It's just kind of a couple of squiggles. But it's worth it because Cancer has some interesting history to it. First of all, you've probably, if you're a geography fan, you probably have heard of the Tropic of Cancer. Oh, Audrey, you mentioned the HA ray stuff. I'll switch that one over in a moment, and we'll see if we can do that. The Tropic of Cancer is something that you have likely heard of, and it is basically the point where on the Earth where on the summer solstice the sun is directly overhead, and it's related to the tilt of the Earth's axis and so on. That's because back a long time ago, when that was determined, the solstice, the sun was in Cancer. Now that's not the case anymore, so it doesn't really even work, but it's still called the Tropic of Cancer. So that's related to the constellation. We also have, if we zoom in a little bit, okay, here is our picture. There's kind of the part that sticks out the most for me is actually this little sort of parallelogram here in the middle. This is the part that I always found easiest to see, and then there's sort of a star that sticks up in all the directions from there. So this little square that they don't draw in this constellation is kind of useful. Right in the middle of that little square, there's a beautiful cluster of stars. You can see it with your unaided eye from a dark sky. It looks like, well, they said it looks like sorry, my cat is clawing at my leg. The star looks like bees buzzing around a hive. And so it's called the Beehive Cluster. It is a beautiful sight. It's something that you can see in binoculars. And if you zoom in, you get a beautiful view of hundreds of stars. Some of them are blue, some of them are yellow, some of them are white. It's a really wonderful thing to use, to see in the sky. The other thing I'll point out about Cancer the Crab is actually a star that you would have a hard time finding. I mean, Cancer the Crab is hard to see in the first place. This star over here is even more hard to see. You probably won't see it unless you're outside the city. It's quite faint. It's got the overly romantic name of 55 Cancri. It's the 55th star in the constellation if you go in order from east to west. The star has recently been renamed, though. Just recently, they started renaming some of the stars that have planetary systems around them. And so 55 Cancri has been officially renamed Copernicus. And orbiting the star Copernicus are 5 planets. And so there's a solar system only about 40 light years away from us, right in that direction. And this is kind of what the solar system looks like. The top one is us. So there's the sun in the middle, and you would have Mercury, Venus that aren't shown, and then here's Earth, and then you would have Mars, then you'd have the asteroid belt, and then here's Jupiter. Well, here's Copernicus system. These were the 3 planets they discovered first. 3 gas giant planets. These 2 are about the size of Neptune in the middle, and then this one is about the size of Jupiter. So it doesn't look like our solar system. These planets actually also are named, although I didn't write down the names of them all. They're also named after, one of them is Brahe, one of them is Lippershey, one of them is Galileo. They're all named after sort of pioneering astronomers. The planets were just discovered in the last 10 or 12 years, but they were named just a few years ago. The most recent discovery in that system is planet F here. So planet F is about 8 times the size of, oh, sorry, no, planet E is about 8 times the size of the Earth, but it orbits right next to its sun. Its year is 18 hours long. It takes 18 hours to go all the way around the sun once. That's crazy. It's so close that the surface is pretty much molten. While it's an Earth-like planet in that it's about kind of like the size of the Earth, it's called a super Earth. There's no way there's anything living there. Star B and star C, they're gas giant planets like Neptune, or planet B and C. Planet D is off the map here. It's a Jupiter-sized planet, and it would be, this scale goes from 0 to 1. It would be at 5, so it's way off that way. And then planet F here is the important one. This is a gas giant planet, so it doesn't have a surface. It's made of clouds, so it's not going to have life on it. But all the gas giant planets in our solar system have moons around them. And so there could be solid moons orbiting around planet F here. Planet F is in the Goldilocks zone for this star. The Goldilocks zone is, well, if you remember the story, you know, Goldilocks tastes the porridge. Some of it's too hot, some of it's too cold, but then the third one was just right. The Goldilocks zone is the distance from the star where the temperature is just right for there to be liquid water. So there's not going to be liquid water on the planet F itself because it's a gas planet, but the moons could have liquid water orbiting them. There's the possibility that life as we know it could exist on any moons of planet F right now. Now we can't tell, we can't really see the details at this point. All we can do is tell that the planets are there and tell how big they are. We don't have pictures of them or anything like that. It's so far away that they're just tiny, tiny little pinpricks. But hopefully there will be some kind of improvement in technology that allows us to see what's there. Tarnver says, why planet F? Basically, when they discover them, the star is called A, and then they just name the planets B, C, D, E, F, G. It's very recently that they've decided to actually give some of these planets cool names, like actual names that people would remember. And they're only doing it for the solar systems that have Earth-like planets in them or are very nearby. So there's just so many planets. Like I think we were up to 7,200 exoplanets that we've discovered around other stars. You just can't name them all. There's going to be millions of them. And I mean, if there is a civilization or life on any of them, they probably have their own name for the planet anyway. So, you know, we should use that once we find it out. So most of the things just get letters and numbers and stuff like that. But now planet F does in fact have a name. Mike, if you have a chance to just check the 55 Cancri thing on the website, that would be great because I forget the name. It might be Janssen, but that might be E. I'm not sure. Anyway, I'll ask Mike to check the name of planet F for us so that we remember that one. Because that is
Harriet.
It is what?
Harriet.
Harriet.
Yes.
Okay.
55 Cancri F is named Harriet. Yes.
Okay.
Harriot.
Okay. There you go. So there's the planet. And it's, I think it's about 41 light years away from us. A few years ago, we actually sent a radio message in that direction. The idea of communicating with extraterrestrial civilizations, it's way easier to listen for someone else that's broadcasting because having a listening device is way easier than having a broadcasting device. But if everybody in the universe was just listening for everyone else and no one was broadcasting, you'd never hear. So some enterprising folks basically put together a message that pretty much is the scientific equivalent of, hi, we're here, and sent it out. And it will reach the 55 Cancris, it'll reach the Copernicus system in 2041. So basically that's not that far in the future. And so if there is life on any of those planets, they could receive a message from outer space in what we call 2041. And then they could try and decode it. And then they could decide to send a message back to us. And it would take 41 years to get back here. It's going to be a really slow conversation. But you got to start somewhere, right? So Cancer the Crab, a faint zodiac constellation, still important because it's in the zodiac, and it has these little gems. For star hopping, to find the star cluster that I was talking about, it's actually kind of halfway between some bright stars. They're quite far apart, but let me come back here. So Leo the Lion has a bright star in it called Regulus. We'll get more into that next week. And then Gemini the Twins has Castor and Pollux, sort of halfway between them. That's where the star cluster is. So if you sweep in between those with your binoculars, you should be able to pick them up as a little fuzzy cloud of dust or fuzzy cloud of gray light with some sparkles in it. And then higher power binoculars or a telescope will really zoom in and show more there. Okay. Let me just see what else we have. Oh yes, we have my favorite topic. We said we were going to talk about daylight savings time in this show. Now, daylight savings time does not start this weekend. It starts next weekend. So like Sunday the 14th, Saturday the 13th, that night at 2 in the morning on the 14th, that's when we set our clocks. We spring forward and set our clocks forward 1 hour because, you know, Mother Nature, who has been having the planet rotate for 4.6 billion years, doesn't know what she's doing. And we humans know better. So we're going to adjust time, right? I'm not a fan of daylight savings time. And I'll tell you why. It doesn't save anything. There's no daylight to be saved. There's the same number of hours. We just get up an hour later or earlier and go to bed an hour later or earlier. Now, back in the old days, when, you know, people would go to bed and they would turn out their lights and that would end their power consumption for the night, it probably saved some money because with the daylight hours sort of matching the work day, it did save some electrical energy and so therefore some money. But now when you turn your lights off at night, that is the least of your energy expenditures. Your fridge is running, your freezer is running, all of your devices are charging. You've got air conditioning running in the summer. There is literally no case for daylight savings time based on saving energy or saving money. In fact, in some places that added daylight savings time late, they're actually spending more money on energy and things like that. Not quite sure why, it's not clear, but it certainly doesn't save any money. And let's face it, people hate it. I mean, if you're a parent and you have kids, you have grown to hate daylight savings time because young kids, they don't adjust their schedule. You basically just move everything off by an hour for 6 months until the clock goes back to normal. It's ridiculous. The last thing is that when you do this change, people get an hour less sleep. And there have been some statistics done. The number of car accidents that happen after daylight savings time spikes. The number of heart attacks and strokes spikes after daylight savings time changes. Now, I can't say for sure that that's, you know, causation instead of correlation, but it sure is interesting that this happens. Now, is it like the full moon emergency story that we were talking about, where, you know, oh, at full moon there's an increase in craziness? Well, no, it's not like that. You can actually look at other times and there isn't that same kind of spike that can't be attributed. So daylight savings time is a really bad idea. It was probably a good idea 100 years ago. It's totally not anymore. Now, it's too late to change it this year, obviously, because it happens in a week. And I don't think I'd want to change it. I like the spring ahead part. If we sprung ahead and then just stayed there, don't fall back anymore, just stay ahead. The daylight hours sort of match the day when you get home from work. It's you got lots of extra daytime. It's not super dark in the morning when you get up. Just everything works out pretty well. So I think what we should all do is let daylight savings time start and then write letters to all the politicians and tell them we don't want to change. Okay, that's what I encourage you to do. No, it really is interesting that we still got this system. And really it comes down to nobody wants to be the first to change. Because if you change and everybody else doesn't, like look at Newfoundland, you know, they're hockey night in Canada, 7 o'clock, 7:30 in Newfoundland. They're the only people that have a half time zone, right? It's awkward. Nobody wants to be the people that don't follow daylight savings time. It's like, you may know the Canadian comedy group, the Arrogant Worms. They always said, if everyone does it, no one looks stupid. So no one wants to be the first person to stop and then look stupid, even though it's the right thing to do. Okay. Daylight savings time, the night of the 13th into the morning of the 14th. We will spring ahead. We'll see what happens. I saw a few comments coming through here that we should start up a petition. Yeah, we'll have to look at that. It's one of those things. It's interesting though, if it just reminds us how artificial time is. I mean, we could call time anything we wanted. I mean, it used to be that we would call noon the time when the sun was at its highest, and then everything else was just sort of relative to that. And now we sort of move it around, and then we came up with time zones because we realized the earth was round and we had to make everything work out when they had the railroads going and so on. So there's all these things that we muck around with time. It's just completely made up. It's something that we have invented as humans to sort of give us a nice linear way of looking at the universe. Is time a real thing even? Does it really exist? There's all sorts of amazing astrophysics and crazy questions we could get into about that. But for now, daylight savings time is coming up, and we'll have to roll with it. How are we doing for questions there, Mike? Did anybody agree or disagree with my little rant?
Well, it's interesting. You should go on Facebook after this episode is done. Ronald has put forth some arguments from his side that he feels are in favor of daylight savings time. So I'll be curious to see what your response will be. I've left that one alone for you.
Okay.
What else? You know what? Just going back to our constellations, someone in the Zoom chat asked, what is the most challenging zodiacal constellation? I would certainly put Cancer, the crab, up there, but I don't know about you, but Libra is a real tough one for me to find. I don't know if you agree with that, Scott.
Yeah, you know, Libra is, because it's only basically 4 stars and they're not very bright, and it's sort of right next to big bright Scorpius. It is kind of hard because it gets lost in the background there for sure. And it's one of the smaller ones. For me, I always have a problem with Pisces because it's like this long sort of chain of faint stars that sort of doubles back on itself. And I always have trouble with that. And my own, actually, Aquarius, the water carrier, it's just, it's dots. There's no water carrier. There's no nothing like that. So those are the ones I have trouble with.
Definitely, yeah, those are troublesome as well. And I have to say, you are getting a lot of requests to know what is your cat's name, and I particularly want to know, why is your cat not part of the show?
You know, that is an excellent question. I realized as soon as I mentioned it, I should have just picked him up and brought him on. I recently learned that the Zoom etiquette is that when there's a pet, the pet must be part of the meeting. And so my cat's name is George, and he is a wonderful little ginger cat that he's mostly nice. He just doesn't like any living beings other than himself. So yeah, he pretends to for a few minutes, but then it's sort of like, yeah, okay, you patted me 3 times, now I will kill you. So if I brought him on camera, it's very possible that this footage would have to be used as like forensic evidence, because he tends to bite a lot. But I'll see if we can bring George in next week. So come back for that. Is there a cat constellation? Well, Leo, of course, perfect. Leo the lion is a cat. So there's our excuse. I'll bring George in for next week. Okay. Let's see. Some questions have been going by about. I've seen this one a couple times from a few people. Who created the telescope? Nobody really knows, but a number of people. In fact, one of the people that one of those planets we were talking about, 55 Cancri, one of its planets is named Lippershey, named after Hans Lippershey, who is Dutchman who basically took some glasses lenses together and just put them in the right order and made a telescope. He didn't use it for astronomy though. He used it to look at boats and that kind of stuff. But Galileo took that idea and used it to look at the sky. And he's one of the first, not the first, but he's one of the first people to really observe the sky meticulously with a telescope and then publish his observations. And he's probably the most famous person. And then there have been all sorts of other designs. Isaac Newton made a telescope design in the 1700s, and there's a bunch of other ones as well. So that's the beginning of the telescope there. Oh, right. Audrey says there's also the Lynx constellation. So that Lynx is a really hard one to see. In fact, it's right next to Cancer here. If we just bring our sky down, there's Cancer down over here. Lynx is this faint line of stars that is sort of over in front of the nose of the Big Dipper. I don't know how that is supposed to be a cat in any way. I mean, I guess if you're not going to worry about the pictures matching the stars, you can draw whatever you want, right? There's no stars that go up for the ears or the legs or whatever. Still, there are a few cat related constellations, so we'll bring those back in. Abby asks, is George named after Uranus or Uranus, the most unfortunately named planet? You know, George is the name that he came with when we got him. He was a rescue cat. And so we just kept his name because he seemed to respond to it. But you're right. The planet Uranus was originally going to be named George's star because the guy who discovered it worked for King George. You know, if you saw Hamilton, that King George, yeah, there should be a song about it. And everybody in the world said, no, we're not doing that. Pick something from mythology. And basically he got voted down. But I'll have to, maybe I'll just nickname the cat Uranus because that would be funny. All right, we're running out of our time here. And I do want to point out that it looks like it's going to be clear a little while, at least in southern Manitoba. I am going to try and head outside after the show and maybe do a little bit of telescoping and things like that. I encourage you to get out and look at the real sky. That's what this is all about. It's great to think about the sky and to, you know, learn about it and things like that. But anytime you get a chance to go out and actually see the stars, there's a magic there that is hard to recreate on a screen. So I encourage you to get out under the stars as much as you can. You can always reach us through social media. If you have questions, if you have other things that you would like to know, if you've got suggestions for future shows, you can always reach us through the Manitoba Museum's Facebook and YouTube pages where this streams. There's our email for any questions, or if you want to send us pictures or video or anything like that. This weekend, there may be a chance of some northern lights. Keep your eyes and ears open to the internet, and hopefully you'll get some information on that. I tend to post things on my personal page, which is Scott the Skywatcher on Facebook. You can always join me there. And I'll try and keep people apprised of when there's a good chance for northern lights for our area. On behalf of myself and Mike and everyone at the museum, thank you all for watching. We love doing this show, and we're really excited to be able to bring this show to you every week, talk astronomy. We love to get letters, we love to get mail, so stay in touch. Oh, wow, the message thing just went crazy here. We have so many things that have gone by. I will try and get to a few more questions. If you ask a question in Facebook or in the YouTube thread, I will get to them sometime this evening and try and answer them for you. Otherwise, drop us an email. Thanks again for all of this, everyone. We will see you next week. And next week we have International Planetarium Day. Did you know there was such a thing? Unfortunately, our planetarium won't be open, but we will be able to tell you how to make your own planetarium at home. We also will be talking about our Northern Lights workshop, Chasing the Northern Lights. There's one on Saturday. We ran one or on Tuesday that was really successful. And this is another one coming up, so you can learn how to find the Northern Lights, how to go out and take pictures of them and things like that. So that'll be a very fun workshop. You can get tickets for that through the Manitoba Museum. And that's pretty much all we have for tonight. So enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy your evening. Get out under the stars, and we will see you again next week. Thanks again for joining us. See you soon.